Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights, episode about cars, also about cards. Thanks, sponsors, Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication, ComC.com, Burbank Sports Cards, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Heritage Auctions, Huggy the Scott Auctions, Topps, Panini, and Upper Deck. I was playing golf with several friends a few years ago, and one of the guys I didn't know as well, and one of my friends said, "Oh, you really ought to meet Jim here. He's got one of the world's greatest or biggest, I forget what he said, car collections." And the guy said, "Oh, wow, how many do you have?" And I said, "It's too many to count." He said, "You're kidding me." Anyway, the punchline is he thought of cars, not cards. If you would have asked me, do you have a garage full of cards? At that point, perhaps I did, but I didn't have multiple garages. Although I do know somebody that has multiple garages full of cards. So cars and cards are perhaps inextricably linked, as I will point out. I also was on the board of an automotive service company, a private company, a startup. I knew the founder. He put me on the board because most of the board were car guys that worked in the industry. He wanted me on there because, number one, I'm a pro bono consultant, but also I'm a card guy, not a car guy. But I do drive a nice car, and I think cars are great and everything, but I was able to ask questions and make suggestions that were not coming from an industry insider. But as I realized that cards and cards, there are some similarities there. And I really enjoyed being on that board. I had a couple friends that bought some collector cars back, not cards, but cars, more than 10 years ago now. And they were very low mileage, vintage classics, and frankly, they were afraid to drive them. They would agree to take them out. They were two buddies. They didn't live that far apart. And once a week, one guy would go out and he'd drive over to the other guy's house and honk or something. And then the other guy would do it the next week. And I just thought, there's a moral in this story. If you have such a great car, but you're afraid to drive it, if you have such a great card and you're afraid to bring it out, if you don't drive old cars around, they get messed up. Cars need to be driven, and cards need to see the light of day. There's no fun in keeping your great car in a climate-controlled garage. I'm not sure there's a lot of fun in keeping your great cards in a climate-controlled vault. Another friend, maybe 15 years ago, he bought a used red Ferrari. Now, I don't know what a used red Ferrari is compared to a brand new Ferrari because they're always shiny. He had it for about 6 months. He drove it around. Everybody saw it. And at the end of 6 months, I think his wife said, "You need to get rid of that car." And he complied. And I don't think he lost money. It was a very cool, flashy car, flex car, muscle car, whatever. I think people sometimes do that with cards. They get the proverbial red Ferrari, have it for 6 months, and then sell it. And in his case, I don't think he lost any money, or very little money if he did lose money, because that was a timeless classic and there were not that many of them out there. I actually traded vintage cards, carrying case of vintage cards that I traded for a car. Back in the spring of 1980, trading cards for a car. And in those days, you could do that. Maybe today you could do that as well. The other thing that motivated this episode is just the whole advice that you hear about staying in your lane. That's a car reference to me, but it applies to cards too. Staying in your lane is generally a good thing. I have found the accidents I'm aware of in cars, either out of control speeding or you're not paying attention. Changing lanes is an opportunity for bumping into something, and then backing up. So all those things in the card hobby, speeding out of control, not paying attention, changing lanes, backing up can be a problem. I drive in the middle lane. I don't like to drive in a slow lane. I don't like to drive as much in the fast lane unless I'm in a hurry. If I'm in the middle lane, I figure not much can happen. I've got cars on both sides sometimes, but they're going the same direction as I am. If I stay in my lane, I'm going to be fine. That's what I do in the hobby. In the fast lane, you can get hit head on with the opposing traffic coming in. If you're in a slow lane, my wife and I were driving a couple weeks ago in the rain, and the slow lane had a flooding opportunity. There was very low water, and we went through 18 inches of water in that slow lane, low lane, right lane. And there's telephone poles, parked cars, and other immovable objects over on the right-hand side of the road. So I just drive in the middle. That's equivalent to doing my dollar boxes. I don't want base cards, and I don't want super expensive cards. My lane is that middle lane. The marketing for cars is almost always for the brand new cars, the shiny new cars, and they're heavily promoted. And when you drive them off the lot, they're immediately worth less. Why should we expect that to be different in the card collecting hobby? The latest cards that come out, the boxes, the cases, They're heavily promoted. You're paying extra if you want first off the line and all that. And frequently they're worth less as you drive off the lot. Even last year's cards, even if it's brand new, it was still in the box. A lot of times not in as high a demand. It's not being promoted. It could be a bargain, might not. You just don't know. Car dealers want to sell a car based on what they have in it. So do cards dealers. In the car purchasing group of people, which does not apply to cards, I think, is that many car buyers are primarily concerned with what their monthly payment will be. Maybe some people are doing that with cards, but generally cards are cash and carry. Perhaps it's putting on your credit card, but I'm not a big fan of borrowing money. You're borrowing money for a car because it's going to give you a chance to get to your job, or it provides transportation, not just the enjoyment of having a card. Cars I have bought over the years, if they were a little bit tricked up or a little bit gimmicky, exotic options, those kind of things, those kind of cars that don't have broad appeal, people think, oh, that's nice, but they don't want to pay for it. That happens in the card collecting hobby as well. If it's too quirky, too tricked up, sometimes, not always, because sometimes you catch something that people want, just like these vintage cars. There are certain things in vogue. Teslas, pickup trucks around here have had pretty good demand for used cars in good shape. And those are recognizable. In fact, when you drive up to see, do I want to buy this used Tesla or this used pickup? It's eye appeal. They're not grading on a 10-point scale. You're looking at it, you're mechanically checking it out. But if it looks good, you think, okay, I'll do that. And those seem to hold their values pretty well. Classic vintage cars are routinely restored. But there's a distinction between, are they being restored with the original parts or with the new fabricated parts? That doesn't apply with cards. But for cards, restoration is not kosher. If you just want transportation, you don't want to pay big bucks, you're just going to buy a car that has utility. Is that different from cards where you're just buying cards that are within your budget that you enjoy? You're not looking for the one huge card, which is in vogue now, I understand. But many people, in the car analogy, would rather have a group of good cards instead of one huge card that all their eggs are in that basket. And I think that's a matter of personal preference. It depends on your definition of utility. The safest car to drive is usually the newer car with the latest technology, because the concept is saving your life is more important than saving money or looking good with a vintage classic card. The safest card that you can buy is frequently thought to be a well-established vintage card of a superstar that is perhaps even deceased, that can do no wrong. In cars, they don't call it color matching, but color matters. In cards, increasingly, color matches matter. That the same card, the card will be priced sometimes according to a green card that's for the Celtics. So there's some regional things, and there's some regional color preferences in the United States with cars. More people drive Fords and Chevys and Toyotas and Hondas and those kind of cars than Cadillacs and Mercedes. Some people, they're just not even comfortable with a more expensive car as not being necessary. And even if they were given one or they won one. My sister actually won a car on a Hollywood game show, and she drove it. It was a Buick, if you can remember what a Buick was. But some cars and cars are just too valuable with the family considerations that you have to have. And not everybody wants to drive a Lamborghini or a Maserati. And if they got one, they'd sell it. And that might be the same thing if you pulled a really expensive car from a pack. You'd say, you know what, I love this car. I'm going to keep it for a while, but I'm going to sell it because my family needs the money. Car flippers are really dealers, and typically those are used cars. And they understand, I've known several of those, they know they must buy right, and they must understand demand. They've got to be able to buy it right and know that there will be demand in a reasonable period of time for buying cars. Cars take up a lot of room, and so can your card collection. Or if you're a dealer, certainly there are people that have started stores just because they had too many cards for their home. Cars have garages, cards can have vaults, you can have storage units, but I've gone on the record of saying cars are meant to be driven, cards are meant to be seen, and when you have reduced access to your collection, I don't think that's as much fun. But when I rent a car, I want to enjoy and appreciate a good car that I'm renting. I don't require a great car when I'm renting. There's Hertz, there's Budget, there's Sixt, which is one that does a little more high-end rentals. If you're in Hawaii, you might want to rent a convertible, depending on your circumstance. But to me, that's a try before you buy. And that's what some people, I think, are doing when they're flipping cards. They're flipping because they bought something, they're trying it, they didn't love it as much as they thought, and they're going to put it back on the market and sell it and move on. I'm getting a cheap opportunity to rent a car and say, I like that, and the next car I get, maybe I'll consider that. There's a huge car wash industry. There's not a huge card cleaning industry, but car wiping is okay. Car washing, not okay. If it's card washing, card wiping is okay. Card waxing is not okay, although that may change at some point in the future. And I'm not even going to start in with body work and oil changes and other kinds of routine required maintenance. After all, a car is intended to be driven and a card is possessed and looked at. A lot of collision repair is undetectable to me, but it's not undetectable to an expert. That would be similar to grading cards when a non-expert, hey, I can't see that anything's been repaired here, but an expert grader or professional grader can say, oh, I can see where something was done there. New car dealers handle new and used cars, but vintage cars and vintage cards are frequently separate. The same person doesn't usually sell vintage cards and new cards. They can, but the vintage car dealers, I think that's a very profitable business. They have to really know their market. There's certified used cars. If you go to a dealership, they're going to say, hey, you don't buy a car from a stranger, buy from us. We'll certify this. That's like slabbing and authenticating and verifying that this is the car is what they say it is and the card is. But you could say, show me the Carfax. I believe there will be Carfax in the sense of not just grader's notes, but there'll be more and more tag along with a card, especially a better card. They're already looking at the eye appeal. They've got the 4 subgrades or grader's notes. Again, the experts can see it, but when you can't see it, you need a trained eye to vouch for it, because that trained eye has seen so many cars. When I drive in, if there's a tiny scratch on the back of my car, the guy just walking around it in 15 seconds detects it because he knows that's not supposed to be there. You don't hear too much about trading 2 cars for 1 car. You hear a lot about trading a car plus some cash for a better car, or sometimes a car on your trade-in. The dealer in the card collecting hobby, there is not the same expectation in a car dealer that the car dealer is almost always going to win. They have the knowledge advantage. They have a financing advantage. There's lots of ways to win for the car dealer. But somehow when we get in the card hobby, we think it ought to be an even deal, that the dealer and I should be on even footing. And I don't think so. The dealer has overhead and is providing a service. Self-driving, semi-autonomous or autonomous cards, I believe that's coming. But to me, I don't want my hobby to become self-driving or autonomous or semi-autonomous. And for some people, I think they're doing that. They're letting someone else or some entity or some strategy dictate what their destination is. They might put in their destination and let somebody or some algorithm. And I don't think that's as much fun as driving on your own. Lastly, I think all cars have a VIN, a vehicle identification number, and I believe in the future cards will too. So this is my other sports card insight here, is that every car is different, every card really is different too. And Fanatics could pull that off if they have 3 of the 4 major full licenses. They could put a QR code or some other identifying unique thing on every card. It'd be trackable. And you could look up that particular card. You could see its sales history, which is the ideal comp, that this actual card sold for something. It would be visible through the slab if you had it. And Fanatics, in its desire to track what's going on and to get a piece of every transaction, they'd have a better chance of doing that if every card had a VIN or a card identification number that wouldn't just say what it is, but it'd say what it is and here's what copy it is. But then we'd know how many cards, how many of the same card you could put together, the math, unless the numbers were randomized in some way. There's ways to disguise that. But people seem to want that. They want to be able to look up their card, and if every card had an ID and there were some unique numbers and you knew what something was, that would go a long way to giving people confidence that here's what I have and here's what it's worth. So at any rate, cars and cards, some similarities. Just been thinking about that for a few years. Stay in your lane. I'm staying in mine. So thanks, and be back in a couple days.